In 1932, a loaf of bread cost 9 cents, and millions of American families had nothing to put inside it. So they got creative in ways that would make a modern food blogger go completely silent. Number 22 on this list was so common in working-class neighborhoods that food historians believe nearly a third of the country ate it at least 3 times a week. Yet today most people would not recognize it as food at all. Number 7 was quietly recommended by Depression-era nurses as a legitimate source of daily nutrition. And number 1, the sandwich that defined an entire generation's relationship with hunger, has a name so honest it will stop you cold. Hi, my name is Joseph, and this is Forgotten Old American. Number 30. The sugar sandwich. Before there was jelly. Before there was peanut butter in every pantry, before the snack food industry thought it knew better than your grandmother, there was butter on white bread and a handful of granulated sugar pressed into it. That was lunch. A pound of sugar cost 5 cents in 1932. A loaf of bread cost 9 cents. For a mother feeding 4 children on whatever she had left after rent and coal, the sugar sandwich was not laziness. It was arithmetic. The butter provided fat, the sugar provided energy, and the slight crunch of crystals dissolving against soft bread provided something that poor families almost never had enough of: pleasure. Children carried these to school wrapped in wax paper and said nothing about what was inside. The embarrassment was real, but so was the fullness. Food scientists who have studied Depression-era diets now point out that the combination of fat and simple carbohydrate created exactly the rapid energy absorption that a malnourished child needed to concentrate through an afternoon of lessons. Your great-grandmother was not desperate. She was accidentally brilliant. Number 29. The lard sandwich. In the coal towns of Pennsylvania and the mill towns of Ohio, lard was cheaper than butter and twice as calorie-dense. Mothers spread it thick on day-old bread, hit it with a pinch of salt, and handed it across the table without ceremony. A 5-pound bucket of lard cost 30 cents in 1931 and lasted a family through 2 weeks of sandwiches. The fat content was extraordinary by modern standards, nearly 1,000 calories in a single sandwich. But for a man swinging a pickaxe underground for 12 hours, or a woman hauling laundry up 4 flights of stairs, those calories were not excessive. They were survival. When vegetable shortening arrived in the 1940s, promising modernity and cleanliness, lard disappeared almost overnight from respectable kitchens. We traded a natural fat that human beings had eaten for thousands of years for a processed alternative that we now know causes the very diseases we were trying to prevent. Your great-grandmother's lard sandwich was healthier than the thing that replaced it. That is not a small irony. Number 28. The mustard sandwich. Yellow mustard, 2 slices of bread, nothing else. I know what you were thinking. Just stay with me. This was the sandwich that appeared in Hoovervilles outside every major American city in the early 1930s. A jar of yellow mustard cost a nickel and lasted weeks. It provided almost no nutrition on its own, but the sharp vinegar and salt flavor was powerful enough to convince an empty stomach that something real had happened. Men ate mustard sandwiches because mustard was what they had. That was the entire reason. There is a particular kind of dignity in making the best of what you have. The mustard sandwich was that dignity stripped to its absolute minimum. Number 27th. The ketchup sandwich. When the icebox held nothing but condiments and the grocery money had run out 4 days early, mothers reached for the Heinz bottle. 2 slices of bread, a thick spread of ketchup, sometimes a slice of raw onion if one was available. A bottle of ketchup cost 12 cents in 1933 and lasted nearly 2 weeks if the family was careful. The tomatoes in the ketchup provided vitamin C. The vinegar aided digestion. The sweetness made it feel like more than it was. In working-class neighborhoods of Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland, the ketchup sandwich was so common that children stopped registering it as unusual. It was just Tuesday. It was just what you ate when Thursday was still 3 days away. Number 26. The mayonnaise sandwich. In the South, before Hellmann's had fully crossed the Mason-Dixon line and Duke's reigned supreme in every kitchen, mothers spread mayonnaise thick on soft white bread and called it lunch without apology. The eggs in the mayonnaise provided protein, the oil provided fat. A jar cost 15 cents in 1934 and stretched across more sandwiches than you would believe. Some families added a slice of raw onion. Some added a shake of the black pepper. Most ate it plain and were grateful. Today we call it aioli and charge $14 for it at restaurants that serve it with truffle fries. Our great-grandmothers would not know whether to laugh or cry. Here is where the story gets uncomfortable. These first 5 sandwiches, sugar, lard, mustard, ketchup, mayonnaise, have one thing in common that nobody talks about. They disappeared not because people stopped being poor. They disappeared because prosperity taught people to be ashamed of what had kept them alive. By 1950, the economy had recovered enough that families who had eaten mustard sandwiches through the 1930s did not want to remember it. They wanted to forget. They wanted meat in their sandwiches and groceries in their icebox, and never again the particular humiliation of scraping a condiment jar across white bread and calling it a meal. That forgetting was understandable. It was also a loss. Because the ingenuity behind these sandwiches, the knowledge that you could feed a child on pennies and keep their energy up and their spirits intact, that knowledge walked out the door right alongside the shame. Sandwiches 25 through 21. Number 25. The potato sandwich, cold mashed potatoes left over from last night's dinner. Spread between 2 slices of bread like a rough paste. That was the working man's lunch from Buffalo to Baltimore. Carbohydrates on carbohydrates. Dense, filling, and so cheap it barely registered as a cost. Potatoes sold for 2 cents a pound during the worst years of the Depression. A family could buy 10 pounds and eat from it for a week, across every meal. The leftover mash became tomorrow's sandwich without a second thought. Today we pay $12 for loaded potato skins at chain restaurants and feel clever about it. We are eating a Depression-era sandwich with better lighting and a worse value proposition. Number 24. The onion sandwich. Raw onion, sliced paper thin, buttered bread, salt. That was it. Onions cost a penny each in 1933, and they kept for weeks in a cool cellar without any special treatment. They contained vitamins that prevented deficiency diseases in families who rarely saw fresh produce. They provided a flavor so sharp and alive that the sandwich felt substantial even when it was not. On factory floors, you could identify an onion sandwich eater 10 feet away. The social cost was real. They ate it anyway because hunger is a more persuasive argument than embarrassment every single time. Number 23. The bean sandwich. Cold pinto beans mashed slightly with a fork, spread across bread like a thick, rough paste. This was Monday's lunch across Texas, New Mexico, and everywhere else that dried beans were the backbone of the weekly food budget. A pound of dried pinto beans cost 5 cents in 1932 and fed a family across multiple meals. Workers carried bean sandwiches in paper bags to railroad yards, oil fields, and cotton gins. Some added a slice of raw onion. Some added a shake of hot sauce. Some ate them plain, without ceremony. Modern nutritionists will tell you that the combination of complex carbohydrates, plant protein, and fiber in a bean sandwich was nearly ideal for sustained physical labor. Our great-grandmothers did not know the science. They knew their husbands came home standing up instead of crawling. That was enough. Number 22. The bread and gravy sandwich. When the Sunday roast was gone and only the drippings remained in the bottom of the pan, mothers added flour and water and salt and made gravy. Then they poured that gravy between 2 slices of bread and called it supper. The gravy was everything. It carried the memory of meat long after the meat itself had been eaten down to the bone. Children soaked their bread until it fell apart and scraped the plate with the crusts. A single roast fed a family for 3 days and then provided gravy sandwiches for 3 more. Nothing was wasted because wasting anything was simply not an option. There are restaurants right now charging $9 for bread served with dipping sauces. Our great-grandmothers invented that concept during the worst economic collapse in American history and never once thought to put it on a menu. Number 21. The tomato sandwich. Only in summer. That was the rule, and everyone understood it without being told. A real tomato sandwich required a real tomato, not the pale hollow supermarket variety shipped green from 1,000 miles away, but a garden tomato, thick-walled and warm from the afternoon sun, sliced so thick the juice ran down your wrist before the bread even reached your mouth. White bread. Mayonnaise spread thick on both sides. Salt and pepper. 3 slices of tomato that hung off the edges. Press down. Eat immediately, standing over the sink, because the juice would ruin whatever you were wearing. Nearly every working-class family with any kind of yard grew tomatoes because seeds cost almost nothing, and the return was extraordinary. For a few weeks every August, families who had eaten mustard sandwiches in March ate like kings. The tomato sandwich was the Depression's small, annual miracle. Here is something the history books skip over almost entirely. The garden was not a hobby during the Depression. It was infrastructure. A family with a 20-foot strip of backyard that grew tomatoes and onions and green beans had a food system that no economic collapse could completely destroy. The seeds cost pennies. The labor cost nothing but time. And the yield, those weeks in summer when the garden came in, bought dignity that no amount of government relief could provide. The families who survived the Depression best were not always the ones with more money. They were the ones with more knowledge. They knew how to grow things, how to preserve things, how to stretch things further than seemed physically possible. That knowledge was passed down through kitchens, not cookbooks. And when prosperity arrived, and the gardens were paved over for driveways, and the kitchens were handed over to convenience food, that knowledge began its quiet disappearance. We are still losing it today. That should bother us more than it does. Sandwiches 20 through 16. Number 20, the peanut butter and pickle sandwich. This one sounds like a dare. It was not. It was dead serious, and it was everywhere. The saltiness of the dill pickle cut through the richness of the peanut butter in a way that made both ingredients taste more complete than they did separately. The crunch of the pickle provided texture that soft bread and smooth peanut butter desperately needed. Pregnant women craved it. Children begged for it. By 1936, it had spread from Kansas church potlucks to Kentucky front porches, passed between neighbors like a secret that turned out to be common knowledge. Food bloggers in the last decade have been rediscovering the peanut butter and pickle sandwich and writing about it like they invented fire. They did not. Your great-grandmother figured this out in a farmhouse kitchen in 1934, and she did not need a blog to validate it. Number 19. The banana sandwich. Sliced bananas on buttered bread. Sometimes with a sprinkle of sugar, sometimes with a smear of mayonnaise, which sounds alarming until you try it. In the 1930s, bananas cost 10 cents a dozen, shipped north from Central America on refrigerated boats. For children who rarely saw fresh fruit, the banana sandwich was practically exotic. Mothers mashed them for infants, sliced them for school children, and occasionally fried the whole assembled sandwich in butter for a special occasion. The banana would caramelize against the heat into something that cost 20 cents and tasted like it cost considerably more. A young boy in Mississippi grew up eating these. He later added peanut butter and had the thing deep fried at his mansion in Memphis. You may have heard of him. Number 18. The fried EGG sandwich. A single egg cracked into a skillet filled with bacon grease. It was fried until the edges crisped and browned, and the yolk stayed just barely soft. Lifted onto bread and eaten immediately before the yolk had any chance to reconsider. Eggs cost 12 cents a dozen in 1932. Families who kept backyard chickens had access to eggs at essentially no cost beyond the feed. The fried egg sandwich was the maximum nutrition for minimum expenditure equation, solved perfectly. Complete protein, fat, salt from the grease, satisfaction. Today a fried egg sandwich on brioche with arugula and sriracha aioli costs $13 at a brunch spot in any American city. The 1932 version tasted better. I will not be taking questions on that. Number 17. The head cheese sandwich. Sliced head cheese, the jellied, seasoned loaf made from the meat recovered from a pig's head, layered on rye bread with mustard and diced pickles. German families served it without hesitation. Polish families considered it a point of pride. Immigrant communities across the industrial Midwest kept the tradition alive because they had come from places where wasting any part of an animal was simply not done. Head cheese was thrifty and flavorful, and genuinely good on rye bread with strong mustard. It faded when the children of those immigrants grew up wanting to seem fully American. They traded their parents' food knowledge for acceptance, and a generation later, their own children had no idea what they had given up. Number 16. The liverwurst sandwich. Liver sausage spread on rye bread with a slice of raw onion and a swipe of yellow mustard. Liverwurst cost less than any other prepared meat at the deli counter because it used the organ cuts that American butchers could not otherwise move. German-American families in Milwaukee and St. Louis and Cincinnati bought it without shame and built sandwiches that were nutritionally extraordinary, dense with iron and B vitamins and protein that a family on a limited budget badly needed. It faded when prosperity arrived, and Americans grew embarrassed by anything that tasted powerfully of what it actually was. We traded nutrition for timidity and called it having a refined palate. Here is something worth sitting with. The immigrant kitchens of the Depression era, German-American, Polish, Italian, Jewish, Mexican, were the most nutritionally sophisticated food environments in America at the time. Not because those families had more money. They had considerably less. But because they came from food traditions that had spent centuries solving the exact problem of eating well on almost nothing. When their children wanted bologna on white bread, like the American kids, that accumulated wisdom began to dissolve. We lost it quietly, sandwich by sandwich, generation by generation. What took centuries to build took about 40 years to forget. Sandwiches 15 through 11. Number 15, the deviled ham sandwich. It came in a small rectangular tin with a red devil grinning on the label. Underwood deviled ham. A tin cost about a dime in 1933, and it contained enough aggressively seasoned, finely ground ham paste to cover half a sleeve of crackers or fill 2 sandwiches. Spread on white bread, it delivered a punch of cured meat and mustard and spice that made the whole thing taste considerably more expensive than it was. Workers dropped the tins into coat pockets and ate the sandwiches at job sites without a plate, standing up in the rain if necessary. Underwood still makes deviled ham. It sits on the bottom shelf at certain grocery stores right now. Almost nobody buys it. The Depression generation would consider that a genuine tragedy. Number 14, the salmon patty sandwich. Canned salmon mashed with cracker crumbs, a beaten egg, and a little diced onion. Formed into patties, fried in a skillet until golden and firm. Placed on bread with whatever condiment was available. A can of salmon cost 15 cents in 1934 and produced enough patties for 2 full sandwiches with leftovers. Catholic families made this every Friday across the country. The soft bones in canned salmon, the ones you mash right in, delivered calcium that Depression-era families rarely got from other sources. Doctors who were paying attention noticed families eating canned salmon regularly had better bone health than families who avoided it. Your grandmother did not know the science. She knew it was cheap and that it held together in the pan. That was sufficient. Number 13, the tongue sandwich. Beef tongue simmered for hours until the tough outer skin peeled away to reveal flesh as tender and silky as the finest slow-roasted brisket. It was sliced thin and laid on rye bread with horseradish and mustard. Tongue sold for 20 cents a pound, while regular beef cuts cost twice that. Jewish delicatessens in New York and Chicago had been serving it for decades, and the tradition filtered out into working-class neighborhoods where the economics were simply too compelling to ignore. The flavor was mild and deeply beefy. The texture was extraordinary. Children who grew up eating tongue sandwiches remembered them as luxury food, never realizing they were eating the cut that wealthy families threw away. That gap between perception and reality is one of the more interesting things the Depression produced. Number 12, the chipped beef sandwich. Dried beef, shaved almost translucently thin, soaked briefly to remove some of the aggressive salt, then stirred into a thick white gravy and ladled over toast. The military served this through 2 world wars and called it something considerably less polite than chipped beef on toast. Families served it at home because a small jar of dried beef cost almost nothing, and the flour and milk for the gravy were pantry staples. 2 slices of toast with gravy constituted a complete hot meal that cost perhaps 8 cents total. It survived into the 1950s, before the fast food revolution, and the TV dinner industry gradually pushed it off the table. Another casualty of convenience culture, deciding that effort was the enemy of enjoyment. Number 11, the olive loaf sandwich. Sliced olive loaf, that peculiar pink processed meat studded with pimento-stuffed green olives, layered on white bread with mayonnaise. This was the optimistic sandwich. The one that said, "We are not wealthy, but we are not at the bottom either." Olive loaf cost more than plain bologna, but less than real ham. It occupied a specific psychological position in the Depression-era grocery store, aspirational but achievable. A small luxury families allowed themselves when the week had gone reasonably well. The olives did real work. They provided flavor complexity that plain lunch meat could not match, and made the sandwich feel like something you had chosen rather than something you had settled for. That distinction mattered enormously when choices were scarce. Now let me tell you what a fully stocked Depression-era pantry actually looked like. Dried beans, a sack of flour, bacon grease in a tin beside the stove, a few cans of salmon and sardines, peanut butter, vinegar, salt, mustard, sugar. That was the whole system. From those ingredients, a resourceful woman could produce 30 days of meals without repeating herself more than twice. We sell books about that today and call it pantry cooking. They called it Tuesday. And then everyone stopped needing to know. And then everyone forgot. Sandwiches 10 through 6. Number 10. The pimento cheese sandwich. Sharp cheddar grated fine. Pimento peppers chopped small. Mayonnaise to bind it. Salt and pepper. Spread thick on soft white bread. Pimento cheese was the great equalizer of the Depression-era South. It appeared at debutante luncheons and at fish fries in the same week. It was served at church funerals and at political rallies. The cheese stretched across more sandwiches per dollar than almost any other option, and the pimentos added color and a mild sweetness that made the whole thing feel like you had made an effort. Every family had their version. Every version was the correct one. Disputes over pimento cheese recipes in the South were and remain entirely serious matters. Number 9. The mock apple sandwich. Ritz crackers soaked in lemon juice and sugar and cinnamon, baked until they softened and their edges caramelized, then pressed between slices of bread. This sounds insane. Ritz crackers are not apples. They contain no apple whatsoever. And yet, food scientists who studied this in earnest discovered that the fat content and texture of a Ritz cracker combined with the acidity of lemon juice, produces something that the human palate registers as fruit-adjacent in ways that remain genuinely difficult to explain. Children who had never tasted a real apple pie ate mock apple sandwiches and reported satisfaction. The Depression produced some extraordinary acts of culinary deception. This one holds up under scientific scrutiny. That still surprises me every time I think about it. Number 8. The hot water cornbread sandwich. Cornmeal mixed with boiling water and a pinch of salt, then shaped into a rough patty with wet hands. Fried in lard in a cast iron skillet until both sides were golden, and the outside crackled when you pressed it. Split open while still hot and filled with sorghum syrup, bacon grease, or a thin smear of butter. This was the poor man's sandwich below the Mason-Dixon line. The boiling water activated the starches in the cornmeal in a way that cold water never could, producing a bread that was denser and more filling, and more satisfying than its ingredients suggested. This technique originated in the kitchens of enslaved cooks and was passed through generations of African American families who understood, from centuries of necessity, how to make a handful of cornmeal into something genuinely worth eating. It deserves more recognition than food history has ever given it. Number 7. The sauce sandwich. Pickled pig's feet and ears pressed into a loaf with spices and vinegar, sliced thin, then laid on bread with raw onion and hot sauce. Sauce was soul food before anyone used that term. It emerged from the African American tradition of transforming the cuts of the pig that white families discarded into dishes that were nourishing, flavorful, and built to feed a family on almost nothing. The feet and ears cost pennies at butcher counters because regular customers had no idea what to do with them. Black families bought them, brined them, spiced them, and created something that appeared at church suppers, family reunions, and Saturday lunches for generations. The sauce sandwich has never fully disappeared from certain Southern communities because some traditions are simply too important to abandon, regardless of what the rest of the culture chooses to remember. Number 6. The bacon grease sandwich. Bread. Bacon grease from the tin beside the stove. Salt. That was a sandwich. Every Depression-era kitchen kept that tin without exception. Bacon grease was never thrown away. Not once. Not by anyone who understood what the 1930s had taught. You saved it religiously, used it for frying, used it for seasoning, and when there was nothing else, you spread it on bread and ate standing at the counter and were grateful for it. The flavor was smoky and deeply savory in a way that butter never quite matched. Modern chefs have rediscovered rendered pork fat and are selling it at specialty stores for $8 a jar. The Depression generation would have found that equal parts hilarious and infuriating, because here is what the food industry understood early. These sandwiches were unkillable. You cannot advertise against bacon grease and bread. You cannot build a brand around a jar of mustard. So the industry did something smarter than competing. They waited for prosperity to arrive and let shame do the work for them. They waited for the generation that had eaten these sandwiches to want to forget. Then they filled that silence with processed alternatives and ingredient lists nobody could pronounce. The forgetting was not accidental. It was profitable. Sandwiches, 5 through 1. Number 5. The crackling sandwich. Pork cracklings. The crispy rendered skin left in the bottom of the lard pot after rendering, piled onto bread with a smear of mustard or a dash of hot sauce. Cracklings were the byproduct of a process that every farm family and many town families still performed in the 1930s when they rendered lard from pork fat. After the fat was cooked down, what remained in the bottom of the pot was crackling. It was intensely porky, crunchy, and salty, the original fried pork rind before the snack food industry decided to package and sell the concept back to us. Farm families ate crackling sandwiches without thinking twice. They were not a recipe. They were what happened when you rendered lard and did not waste what was left. The crackling sandwich was thrift made delicious. Number 4. The syrup sandwich. Sorghum syrup or cane syrup, drizzled generously across buttered bread, folded in half and eaten immediately before the syrup ran out the back. In the rural South, sorghum was grown on small farms and pressed into syrup every fall. A gallon cost 40 cents and lasted a family through weeks of breakfast and snack sandwiches. The flavor was deep and slightly bitter, and molasses-rich in a way that corn syrup never matched. Children ate syrup sandwiches the way later generations ate candy bars, quickly, happily, and with a loyalty that persisted for the rest of their lives. Adults who had eaten syrup sandwiches in the 1930s spoke of them with a specific nostalgic warmth that no manufactured snack has ever managed to generate. You cannot engineer that kind of memory. It has to be earned. Number 3. The bread and butter pickle sandwich. Bread and butter pickles, sweet, vinegary, thin-sliced cucumbers fermented in brine, are layered thick between 2 slices of buttered bread and eaten as a complete meal without apology. In 1933, a woman in rural Georgia with a garden could put up 30 jars of bread and butter pickles for almost nothing and eat sandwiches from those jars through an entire winter. The preservation was simple. The yield was extraordinary. What nobody knew at the time, and what food scientists only confirmed in research published in 2019, was that the fermentation process created beneficial bacteria that genuinely aided digestion, and that the vinegar had a measurable effect on blood sugar regulation. The bread and butter pickle sandwich was not just cheap. It was, by modern nutritional standards, legitimately good for you. Your great-grandmother's survival food was healthier than most of what we eat today. Sit with that for a moment. Number 2. The peanut butter and banana sandwich, Depression style. Not the Elvis version, the original, before Graceland, before it was deep-fried in butter and handed to a man who could afford to eat anything on earth. Before it became a legend. It was just a poor family's sandwich in Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia, made from a jar of peanut butter that cost 23 cents, a bunch of bananas that cost 10 cents, and a loaf of bread that cost 9 cents. Spread the peanut butter, layer the banana slices, press the bread down so the banana flattened slightly, and the sweetness began to seep into the peanut butter at the edges. Eat it over the sink because the banana made the bread slip. It was perfect. It was 20 cents. It required no skill and no equipment, and no explanation. It was the Depression's accidental masterpiece, hiding in plain sight on the cheapest possible ingredients. The fact that it became famous only after a wealthy man claimed it says everything about how this country has always decided what food deserves to be remembered. Number 1. The Wish Sandwich. 2 slices of bread. Nothing between them. You wish you had meat. You wish you had cheese. You wish you had anything at all. The Wish Sandwich was hunger with bread around it. The Depression at its absolute floor. The pantry empty. Ingenuity exhausted. And a mother placing 2 slices of bread in front of her children and calling it lunch. The children ate without complaint because they were too young and too hungry to fully understand what they were being asked to accept. Those families never talked about it afterward. They tried to forget. They succeeded well enough that their grandchildren grew up throwing food away without a second thought. That is not a criticism. That is simply what survival looks like from the generation that comes after. We owe it to them to remember, not as a curiosity, not as a punchline, as honest evidence of what human beings will endure and how quietly they will endure it. Make one of these sandwiches this week. Sit down at a table. Eat it slowly, because every sandwich on this list represents a woman standing in a bare kitchen producing something her children remembered for the rest of their lives as comfort. That is not a small thing. That is everything.